we're going to start with the category of best support players. And obviously our the players to choose from: Sanji, Perfecto, Shush, Inters, and Tesses. So we've got a nice little selection here of 5 players.
And we've got some stats to go along with it.
Yeah, we do.
Well. Is there anybody that's just initially jumping out at you just before looking at any of the numbers that you think really deserves to be up there?
Well, first of all, it's hard in today's Counter-Strike to, put a player under a really specific role. Saying a support player, everything is really fluid. But I think, for example, Sanji, that's the guy you think of first.
Yeah.
When you say support player, how many times have you seen him with just a pistol or an SMG, just dropping ops to Jame, dropping guns to Yakindar? So I think that's one of the main reasons why he's on this list, because he kind of
He is like the stereotypical support player.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's maybe the one player in this, and you just be like, he is just a support player.
That's his duty.
Yeah, I think obviously an easy one to kind of pick out as a front runner would be someone like Perfecto, who's played so well for Na'Vi and kind of developed into this role and has been a crucial point of Na'Vi becoming the best team in the world. And he caught a lot of flack when he first joined Na'Vi as well, when he was first in the team. There was a lot of head scratching. I think maybe the most important part about being a support player is that you are going to be the first player to catch all of the from the fans who would like to criticize you.
Yeah, from people who don't really know what's going on in the game. So.
Let's do this. We have got 2 heroic players in here. Let's whittle this down to 1. Let's give heroic just kind of 1, and then we'll continuously get us down to just 2 players remaining. So Tesses and Shush.
So it's really difficult. The better performer is Tesses, but is that is he just better at the role, or is it because it's a little bit different?
I go with Shush personally, just looking at how he's just more his trajectory as a player as well.
And also, I don't feel like either of them is going to be in the top 2, at least not for me, because of our man in slot number 5, Jason, and it is.
Oh, it's our boy Inters. Gambit. Gambit's had a crazy rise today, or this year's been fantastic for Gambit, and Inter's a big part of that. And I mean, obviously Inter's has had the whole year of setting up guys like Shiro and Axile, and probably a big part of the reason why they've had such an explosive year. So yeah, we'll keep them in the yes pile. So we've got these 3 left. We got to whittle it down to 2.
Inter's and Perfecto.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Really to continue the CIS era?
Yeah, for me it's just in the role, they kind of fit it a little bit more, and I think they're also both, in that sense, perform better than Shush has. He's had some great games and great performances, but I think these 2 have been the most consistent support players of the year.
Yeah.
Cool, I would agree with that.
I think it's a good one. So next up in our World Team of the Year is the AWP player. I think there's one name that's definitely going to be standing up, but we're going to go through them anyway. We've got Zywu coming up first, and we've got Shiro, Brokey, the name that we all knew was going to be in here, Simple from Na'Vi, and finally, to round it off, one of the biggest transfers of the year and in the whole of Counter-Strike history, Device on the side of NIP. I think I'm just going to save us the hassle. Simple's definitely going to be up there. Do you want to name one reason why he's up there?
Right, he's the best player in the world. I don't know what to tell you. He can do things with the op that shouldn't be possible. So whatever, just give him the trophy. Put him on the team.
Just his game sense gets overlooked at times, if that's even possible. He's always 1 or 2 steps ahead of the opponent.
Yeah.
I'm going to play Maniac for this one because I know unfortunately he isn't with us here at the World Finals, but Zywu, he's not here to defend his little Frenchman. Do we see Zywu coming up as maybe the second?
I think even someone like Maniac will have a really hard time making a case for Zywu in this one, but I think still he's shown enough to be in this category. Really, I think it's actually close between him and Shiro, right?
Are you agreeing, Shiro?
Yeah. I mean, I think he has to be in the conversation. You have to bring up the kind of year he had. I mean, he's also even kind of known and I guess an unofficial moniker of the young Simple, or the next Simple. He's someone who seems to be following in his footsteps in terms of how much talent he's got, and you've got to give him his props and you got to bring him up here even if he might not be in the top 2.
I think maybe a more difficult one in this category is unfortunately Device, and I kind of hate to say it because the transfer to NIP was so hyped, and unfortunately for him, there have been some external circumstances that have been happening, but it just doesn't seem like he's been gelling as well as maybe we would have hyped it up.
I think the key to Device as an opper, different from Simple and Zywu in that he's not a hard carry op kind of player.
Last, but by no means least, Brokey. Has he done enough to potentially be in the top 2?
Yes, indeed, my boy Brokey. I think he's great. I think he obviously has the mechanics, and some of the criticism was fair, and I think, finding ways to be maybe a bit more impactful, be involved in a little bit more opening kills maybe. He's great when it's late round situations, post-planned.
Yeah, I think in previous years watching Brokey AWP was like, okay, he's got some skills, he's got some games, and I think this year he really kind of established himself.
So we kind of settled on, I mean, obviously Simple is going to be the one. Are we settled on ZywOo joining him, or is there Shiro temptation?
There's some Shiro temptation, but I think realistically it's got to be ZywOo.
Yeah, I think the LAN part of the year, that helped ZywOo kind of. But yeah, this was, I think, the closest one we've had for that second place.
Well, we have selected our top 2 for the AWPers in our World Team of the Year. Make sure you join the broadcast to find out who will be taking that top spot. So to continue on our World Team of the Year, the next category is coach. We've got 5 more coaches coming up here first. Should we maybe start from the top?
Well, let's just start this out really quick, because there's no way we could not have him in the top 2, and that's just Blade. Yeah. Just put him in there right now.
And you look at more or less three things when you look at a coach. You look at player development, you look at the eye test of how they approach the game in certain situations, the discipline of the players, and also a little bit just the kind of culture / atmosphere building aspect, right? And I think it's without a doubt that Blade is, excelling in all 3 categories. This one is going to be a no-brainer for the top 2. And talking about Groove as the next guy, I mean, the acting coach basically of Gambit, I think he also did a great job, because you have to remember in the first half of the year, Hob is doing all these interviews, winner interviews, right? And he's always talking about the coach, the analysts, the support staff.
I think the thing that's going to hurt Groove the most in terms of this kind of a vote, or in terms of this kind of trying to think of him as the best coach of the year, would be the fact that I don't think anyone ever felt like we got the same Gambit on LAN that we had online for the first half of the year.
I mean, I think if we're going to talk about sort of coaches working with younger players, we've got to talk about Xtaz and the fact that we've got Masuta coming in, Kyogen coming in, the fact that he was so instrumental in getting ZywOo in the first place, so instrumental in getting Apex working as an in-game leader. And I think it's a real shame that we don't really get to speak to him, because he obviously is not comfortable speaking English.
I'll say it straight up, if Navi hadn't won everything this year, especially on LAN, he would be my coach of the year.
Also, it's not just the young players that he's built up, but also remember he had to take someone like Apex, who's been, a hardcore entry fragger for his whole career, and help mold him into an in-game leader. And that's been a process over multiple years, not just this year. But even if you see some of the obstacles they went through, like having a really rough Cologne and saying, we actually played a style that actually put ZywOo in a really uncomfortable position, and then fixing that for the next events as well.
So do you think Malik or Threat, our 2 remaining coaches, have any chance of taking it from? Because I feel like it's Blade and Xtaz at the moment.
I think the problem with Threat, because we obviously know him as a very tactical and very strategic person, but NIP's T sides this year have been very, very poor.
But I think for Malik, I think he's a good coach. I think I cannot forgive him what happened for the start of the second part of the year for G2. That whole thing that they didn't boot camp coming off of the break. If it weren't for that thing, I think also G2 could have potentially ruined maybe some of Navi's plans, right? But they took a big hit with how the second part of the season started for them.
Basically, I think really it comes down, unless you have something, I think it'd be Xtaz and Blade as the top 2.
Yeah, I think it's got to be. So taking our top 2 places for the coach of the year is of course Blade and Xtaz. Make sure you're tuning into the World Finals to find out who's going to be taking that #1 coach spot. So next up in our World Team of the Year is the IGL. Anywhere that you want to start for this one, gentlemen?
I think this one is pretty tricky. It's hard because also nowadays you look at a lot of teams and I at least consider it a duo. It's coach plus the in-game leader, right? For me personally, I think Apex has done a really, really good job this year, and just in general, and also the fact and this is another thing I look at as the in-game leader. It's not just how you play and even the T side and how your team plays. It's also the leadership aspect, which is very important, right?
Underrated. And I think that's a perfect segue, because that's a very big point that I wanted to make with Cadian as an in-game leader. Because I don't think anyone's looking at Heroic and saying tactically or strategically they're blowing anyone out of the water, but considering the year that they've had and considering the controversy that they've been stuck and mired in for months on end, I think a lesser team with a lesser leader might have collapsed under that pressure.
I don't think there's a tighter group in today's Counter-Strike.
Yeah, 100%. I want to get back to what you were saying about the coach and in-game leader kind of, the relationship and how important that is, because I feel like that is something that really is going to come up with Boomage as an in-game leader. We've already sort of put Blade as one of our top coaches, if not the top coach of the year. So how do you kind of feel like that relationship works with Boomage?
I think also Boomage is underrated a little bit as the in-game leader. Listen, as a coach, you do most of your work, 95% of your work before the game goes live. You have 4 timeouts and the halftime, and that's it. you know, Boomich has to make those calls. Like,
I do want to bring up Nafani as well, another option in our in-game leader of the year.
Unfortunately, I think he's going to suffer from the same thing that we saw previously with Groove, is that just the accomplishments in the second half of the year didn't quite stack up with the first half of the year, which is always a little bit rough, but I agree. I think he's very important for this team. I think the only real issue I've taken with Nafani throughout this year was a couple of comments and a couple of interviews that he's given before, like big events, like coming into Cologne right before LAN came back, and he was like, yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between online and LAN. And it's like, I get it, but at the same time, you know, results are going to speak for themselves, and obviously there is a little bit of a difference here that you might have underestimated.
And then last but by no means least, we've got Hampus from the side of NIP, and I think he's another
The
in-game
doctor.
leader that maybe falls into the category of, you know, the relationship with the coach being quite an important.
well, it's rough for NAP. They had some good events here and there, but you also pointed out some of the weaker T sides. So in general, I think it's mostly because of his individual performances and like
I was gonna say
the fragging power that maybe he's on this list.
So for me, the top two would probably end up having to go down. I would say Apex and I would say Boomich.
Would you agree with Boomich?
I don't want to, but I have to.
So we've got Apex, we've got Boomage as our top two coming from the in-game leader category. Tune into the broadcast to find out who is going to take that top spot. We have got the entry fragger category. We're going to be starting off with Bit, because he has just had such an exponential rise to the top. Like thinking back to when he first started off in Na'Vi to where he is now.
It's a guy who's taking a lot of fights early on, not necessarily the guy, you know, who runs in first in and execute and is just there to kind of be traded. It's just crazy how good this kid is at just shooting people in the head.
And I think that's what's so scary about this, is the fact that we've got two Na'Vi players on this list with contention of best entry fragger. And I think it's a good point that you brought up, Yanko, that it's kind of different things that we're looking at between these two players, but still incredibly impactful in their own right.
Yeah, absolutely. Electronic, for example, Nuke Yard, T side, right?
Yes.
Like that's such a focal on both CT and T side, such an important area of the map, like something Nico plays as well, the same position. So, and I love Electronic as a player, man. He's the ideal supplement to a player like Simple, like so smart, so calculated.
I think when we're talking about positions on a map as well, somebody that just stands out for me is Shakindo, obviously a Banana on Inferno, and then a ramp on Vertigo as well. Just like, he's so synonymous with those spots, so that's why I think he definitely deserves to be up.
Yeah, he falls into like the category of like the more stereotypical entry fragger that we think of over the course of the years. He's more that kind of an entry fragger, and I'm with you. Like when I think Yakindar, I think of the variety of different plays that he has on A-ramp of Vertigo, the variety of different ways he can apply pressure, he can find kills, coming through smokes at various angles.
And then when we're talking about attitude as well, I think we've got to talk about Stan as one of these players, which just seems so willing to be putting himself in those situations. I love the dynamic that we've seen building between him and Cadian as well, especially. So yeah, I think he's a well-deserved nomination.
Yeah, certainly being here in the top five, I think, you know, a lot of those heroic players have established them as players that are going to have a bright future, and Stan's done a great job with them. I just think there's so many good names within this category that if you're Stan, you're probably like, oh God.
And then to round things off, we've got Nico from G2. Before we recorded this, I know we had a
Second
little bit of a
best player in
discussion.
the world.
Yeah, a little bit of a discussion about this.
But
I know
still
you-
not the best entry fragger according to Jason.
I can't.
Jason would
I can't mentally.
Kinder first. Can you guys look at the numbers?
Why are you so mad? No, Nico's obviously the better player, and I think Nico's obviously got a lot of skill, as we can see. Entry success 57% is mental.
I think for me, these two are the top two that we leave out. I feel bad for Bit. Kinder edges him out because he is a little bit more in the nature of the role, and Nico is just the second best player in the world this year.
Well, all is well
That's
in the
it.
world, because you two now agree we didn't have to split the table.
We don't have to fight.
This is how it goes all the time, Freya. No, Jason wants to push back a little bit, and then he learns his place.
Well, you guys can have your say as well, because we will be crowning the champion entry fragger of 2021. We have the Lurker category. We're going to be starting off with Hobbit.
Yeah, I'd love to. I think Hobbit's great. Legitimately, I think the Hobbit, the first thing you got to say about him is in this era, in this year where Gambit kind of comes off online, becoming the #1 team in the world, winning all these events and going to LAN and kind of struggling to find some of their footing, obviously the inexperience being a factor, Hobbit has been the consistent rock for this team. Hobbit has always been there performing as the most experienced player, as the veteran of a team of young players.
Yeah, he was an awesome player to watch in 2017 when they won the major, and it kind of felt sad that he just disappeared right?
after that.
And it's great that he found a way to invigorate his career, had an awesome year, and I think deservedly on this list.
bring up NAF from Team Liquid next, which is, I feel like is a little bit of a difficult subject to broach because of what we've seen from Liquid. Unfortunately, we know that in the latter half of the year, they know they're going their separate ways, but I think that is a testament even more so to NAF because we saw him really stepping up at the full finals as well in terms of that individual level.
He, obviously, when you have guys like Elige and Fallen and Stewie surrounding you, you're not gonna get a whole lot of conversation focused on you for extended periods of time, but I think NAF is very underrated in terms of how important he is to the Liquid team, especially when I was there. He was awesome.
Rops up next.
He's Jason's #1 with like being last place in like half of the tournaments.
I'm feeling personally attacked.
Half of the tournaments this year. Again, listen, I think Robs is an amazing player.
Yeah.
I think he was again hindered by the fact that the team couldn't just do too much. He didn't have the pieces around him to really go deep and beat some of these better teams. And ultimately, that's what you have to do if you're going to be considered the best at something. It's having to perform on the biggest stage.
And I think NAF's going to fall into that same boat as well.
Flame F up next. Definitely an interesting one to be on the list considering what we've seen of him on his time with Complexity. Nobody can dispute that he was an incredibly hard worker. And then moving on to Astralis, which was, for me at least, seeing him at the full finals and the way he was performing, I was really, really impressed with what he was showing.
Yeah, he's great at what he does in kind of the old Complexity. I don't know if he's had the entire body of work throughout the year to be in the top 2.
Well, YNK, you will be happy because we have got some Kovacs representatives in this category. Hunter coming in, which I think is another really, really strong pick looking at this year.
Yeah, I think so as well. Again, had a pretty good year himself. I think also you look at, in terms of the role, he does have some of those like long lurks that he likes to go to.
He is to Nico what Electronic is to Simple, and I mean, that's a very important quality to have, and I think he's had a great year.
Well, unfortunately, you do have to kick one of these lovely gentlemen out because we only have 2. Who are we kicking?
I would take Blame
straight away?
I'll do Hobbit and Hunter as the top 2.
Hunter and Hobbit, I think, for this one.
Fair enough, Hunter and Hobbit are taking our top spots, so make sure you tune into the broadcast to see who'll take that championship place.